What is going on, football fans? The New York Giants were back at it again today for their fifth practice in training camp and their fourth straight practice overall, and it was the second practice with the pads on. And by all accounts today, the physicality was up. Now, you don't want it to get too physical. As we all know, the New York Giants have kind of suffered from some injuries, but there were a lot of encouraging things to take from today's practice. Some members of both the offense and defense looked very strong, but before we get into that, we are going to talk about what is usually the thing that is on my mind the most when it comes to training camp, and that is keeping players healthy. And we will start, of course, with the injury report, much like we did yesterday. And you're going to hear a lot of the same names from yesterday's injury report as a lot of the same players remain injured. And we'll start with Darius Slayton, the fifth-round pick out of Auburn, remains sidelined. He has not partaken in any of the practices yet to date. He has a lingering hamstring injury. He was talked about by Pat Shurmur. We'll get into that in a second. The other player I want to touch on, Britton Golden, also was out yesterday. An undrafted wide receiver is out with a groin injury. George Asafo-Ajayi had his first day on the injury report. Yesterday, of course, we had mentioned that he was getting first-team reps at that right tackle position, the seventh-round pick this year by Dave Gettleman and the New York Giants. Well, he was out today with a concussion that I assume he either got yesterday late in practice or possibly today, but he was out with a concussion. Mark McLaurin, who I touched on yesterday, somebody stepped on his foot. Well, that foot was broken. So he was out today as well. Henry Tolliver was out, and Sam Beal remains out with a hamstring injury. So that was the gist of the injury report. The players that were touched on, Darius Slayton, Pat Shurmur said that he thinks he will be back sooner than later. He still doesn't consider it a very serious injury. Sam Beal got a groin and a hamstring injury. It's just something he has to deal with, was the quote by Coach Pat Shurmur. We anticipate he'll be back soon, maybe not today, but soon. He hinted at probably Tuesday's practice. Of course, they will be off Monday. Wide receiver Sterling Shepard remained limited with the thumb problem, as he should be. Make sure you're rested up. We're going to need you for the regular season. But by all accounts, he should be back long before the season starts. So that's some encouraging news as well. Safety Jabril Peppers was on workload management, meaning that he took place a little bit in some drills, but not a full workload by him, as he had a small injury. They didn't really go into specific detail as to what exactly it was, but it doesn't sound like it's anything serious. Which will now bring us to some of the news and the notes and the highlights from today's practice. And today's practice, they had a lot of one-on-one drills, which is always the highlight of training camp, when you get to see the offensive line and defensive line really go at it. And some players that really performed well in those one-on-one drills were Shane Zimenez, the third-round pick, the X-Man out of Old Dominion, the pass rusher, and Marcus Golden. They said that they got the best of Nate Solder and Mike Remmers in those drills, but overall, in those one-on-one drills, the 7-on-7s, the offensive line did look relatively strong. But Zimenez had a really strong practice. We're going to speak a little bit more on him in a little bit. We will start with the quarterback position like we always usually do. And Eli Manning today continues to have a very strong training camp. He was 8 of 10 today. He developed some rapport with his wide receivers. He even threw a touchdown to Rhett Ellison, a 5-yard strike. And we're going to get into a little more chemistry that he has with another wide receiver in a second. Daniel Jones was 5 of 12, so not as strong of a practice for him. I don't believe he threw an interception. Still has not done that in training camp. Benny Fowler caught 2 red zone touchdowns in the red zone drills off the arm of Daniel Jones. With Jabril Peppers not in pads today, the starting safeties were Antoine Bethea and Michael Thomas. And Bethea looked really strong today. We're going to get into that in a bit as well. C.J. Conrad, the undrafted tight end who really stood out in the OTAs and mandatory minicamps, caught a touchdown off the arm of Kyle Laletta. Conrad continues to be a force and a guy that will contend to make this 53-man roster, the undrafted tight end. And as I mentioned before, Zimenez was great on the one-on-one drills. He also had one player in particular that he looked great, where he was able to get after the quarterback, Daniel Jones, and bat down a ball. So he continues to really impress early on in training camp. Another guy that really stood out today was the 17th overall selection from this year's draft, and that, of course, is Dexter Lawrence, the defensive tackle from Clemson, standing at 342 pounds. They say he continues to show that athleticism for a big man, and there was one play today where Russell Shepard received an end-around handoff, a 6'1", 192-pound receiver, and Dexter Lawrence was able to catch him on the sideline, moving and grooving. You got to love hearing that. Dexter Lawrence, I think, is going to be a big force even in his rookie season for the New York Giants. I'm starting to really, really like that pick. And then the other guy that they really wanted to touch on was Cody Latimer. It was noted that Cody Latimer and Eli Manning seem to have a really, really strong connection. They've seen that through the first few days of training camp. Latimer has caught a few comeback routes in tight coverage throughout not just this practice, but previous ones as well, and they seem to have the timing down. They seem to have a good rapport, which is important, especially considering Latimer may have a much more expanded role than we all thought, going into camp with all the injuries and the pending suspension from Golden Tate, which we hope doesn't take place, but probably will. The other guy I wanted to touch on was the veteran Antoine Bethea. As I said earlier, they said he looked unbelievable today, and he did not look his age at all. He had great side-to-side quickness. He was able to go from the middle of the field on one player in particular and knock away a pass on the sideline thrown to Wayne Gallman. So overall, a lot of good things to report today. Eli Manning continues to look very strong. Cody Latimer has that good chemistry with him, as they've said throughout training camp. Dexter Lawrence looked like a beast. Zimenez continues to really impress early on in camp. And yeah, that's for the most part is the news and notes. Of course, the players that have been injured seem to continue to be injured. Hopefully they can get healthy by next week and get some reps as we approach the preseason. I will have more Giants videos up in the coming days. I plan to do a few more, possibly even by tomorrow. And of course, I'll have that training camp report up for you guys on Tuesday. But as always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.